I've been thinking a lot lately about how many women are not actually angry at other people as much as they are carrying the cost of what they have not said, not asked for, and not changed. And that is resentment. I want to talk about resentment that is not always the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, not even the kind that necessarily turns into shouting or conflict. Today, I want to talk about the quieter version, the version that sits under your tone, under your tiredness, under the distance you feel in your relationship, under the irritation that seems bigger than the moment in front of you, under the sense that somehow everyone needs something from you and nobody really sees what it costs. I think a lot of women live with resentment for much longer than they realize. And because they are high functioning and because they are used to carrying a lot, they often do not stop to really examine it. They just keep going. But resentment has a way of leaking. It leaks into the way you respond, the way you withdraw, the way you harden, the way you stop asking, the way you stop wanting to give, even when part of you still loves deeply. So today, I want to talk about resentment in a very honest way. We are not going to blame others. We are not going to cover it in a superficial, just set boundaries way, but in a more real, deep way. Because if we do not understand resentment properly, we either drown in it or we judge ourselves for feeling it. And neither one helps. Welcome to Loved Without Losing Yourself. This is for the woman who is strong, capable, responsible, and outwardly functioning, but internally feels the cost of holding too much for too long. The woman who loves deeply, gives deeply, shows up deeply, but sometimes looks around at her life and realizes that somewhere in the process she has left herself out of it. And today we are talking about resentment, because resentment is one of those emotions that tells the truth, but not always in the cleanest way. So the question I want to explore is this: is resentment useful? Is it an emotion that serves us, or is it one that quietly poisons us? And my answer is yes and no. I think resentment can be useful for a moment. It can be useful in the way a warning light is useful. It tells you something is off. It tells you something has gone unattended. It tells you there is a mismatch somewhere between what you need and what is happening, between what you feel and what you are expressing, between what you are carrying and what is actually yours to carry. So in that sense, yes, resentment is useful. It can be useful because it reveals something. But beyond that, when resentment becomes the place you live, it becomes expensive. It becomes emotionally expensive, relationally expensive, physically expensive, because resentment was never meant to be a home. It was meant to be information. And I think that is one of the most important distinctions in this conversation. Resentment as a signal versus resentment as residence. If resentment is a signal, it can wake you up. If resentment becomes a residence, it hardens you. And I think many women know exactly what I mean when I say that. Resentment does not always feel like anger. Sometimes it feels like emotional flatness. Sometimes it feels like coldness. Sometimes it feels like I cannot be bothered. Sometimes it feels like I do everything and nobody notices. Sometimes it feels like, why should I even ask? And sometimes it feels like I am tired of being the one. Now, of course, there are times when somebody genuinely is behaving badly. There are times when people are selfish, dismissive, immature, unavailable, or inconsiderate. I am not denying that. But for many women, resentment is not only about what other people are doing. It is also about what they themselves have been participating in. And that is the harder truth. Resentment often builds in spaces where truth has been delayed. When you keep helping after you are already depleted. When you expect someone to notice your needs without you clearly expressing them. When you keep overfunctioning and then feel angry that others are underfunctioning. When you stay silent to keep the peace and then feel lonely inside the very peace you helped create. That is where resentment becomes so painful. It is not just they are not giving me what I need. It is often also I have not been fully honest about what I need. I have been overwriting myself. I have been hoping someone else will rescue me for a pattern I keep participating in. And this is where I want to be very careful. This is not about blaming women for what they feel. It's not about assigning blame. It is about reclaiming power. Because the minute we only make resentment about the other person, we lose access to the part we can actually change. And that is where we may stay stuck for years. We stay in the story of who is disappointing us, who is not showing up, who is not noticing, who is not doing enough. And maybe all of that is true. But if your whole inner life becomes a case against someone else, you will stay emotionally trapped. This is when your peace depends on them changing first. And sometimes the deeper work is not how do I get them to do more. Sometimes the deeper work is where have I stopped being honest? Where have I given up my identity? Where have I confused love with self-erasure? Where am I expecting unspoken needs to be understood? Where have I abandoned myself silently, invoicing someone else for the cost? That last one is not easy to hear, but it is the truth. And I think many of us do exactly that. We do not send the emotional invoice out loud. We send it internally. I did all this. I carried all this. I tolerated all this. I adjusted all this. And now I am full of bitterness that nobody compensated me for what I never clearly named. That is the quiet mechanics of resentment. I think high-achieving women are especially vulnerable to resentment for a few reasons. The reason I know this is because I was one of them. And whatever I say here, the questions, the prompts, the information I'm sharing with you right now, it has been my journey over the last 2 years. So I think we are vulnerable to resentment for these reasons. First, because we are competent, and competence attracts reliance. When you are the one who can handle things, people hand you things. Second, many of us, we have been praised for being easy, strong, mature, giving, understanding, and self-sufficient. We build an identity around those qualities. And then anything that threatens that identity, having needs, disappointing others, asking for help, saying no, creating inconvenience, starts to feel unsafe. So instead of expressing the need early, we suppress it, we minimize it, we postpone it, we explain it, we tell ourselves we should not be bothered by it. And resentment starts growing underneath the performance of being fine. And the third reason is because many women confuse love with accommodation. They think love means understanding more, bending more, tolerating more, waiting longer, caring more. And there is a place for generosity in love, of course, but generosity without self-respect eventually turns into depletion. And depletion, when it has no language, often turns into resentment. So if you are listening and thinking, yes, I feel resentful, but I also feel guilty for feeling that way, I want you to hear this. If you're feeling resentment, it doesn't mean that you are a bad woman. It often means you have been living beyond your emotional truth for too long. The problem is not that resentment appeared. The problem is when it becomes your long-term emotional climate. Once resentment settles in, it distorts everything. It changes your interpretation of small moments. It makes generosity feel forced. It makes intimacy harder. It makes communication sharper or colder. It turns ordinary requests into triggers because they land on an already overloaded system. And then people around you often only see the tone. They do not see the years underneath it. So let me come back to that distinction again, because I think it is the center of this episode. Resentment as a signal says something here needs attention, something here has gone unspoken, something here is costing me, something here is out of integrity, something here needs a boundary, a conversation, a decision, or a change in participation. That is useful. That kind of resentment can wake you up. It can bring clarity. It can bring honesty. It can help you stop pretending. But resentment as residence sounds different. It sounds like they should know. They should change. They always fill the blanks. I do everything. No one ever. I guess this is just my life. I will keep doing it but I will be angry the whole time. That is where resentment stops being information and starts becoming identity. And that version will shrink you. It will make you emotionally unavailable even to yourself. Resentment as a residence keeps you facing backwards. It keeps your energy tied to what should have happened, what they should have done, what they should have noticed, what they should have understood. And when your mind is constantly turned backward like that, you cannot create change clearly. What do we do with resentment? And I want to give you this reframe because it's very important. We do not build an identity around it. Instead, we listen to it. We ask, what is this feeling trying to show me? Not how do I get rid of it quickly. Not how do I prove I am right. Not how do I make the other person finally understand. But what is this showing me about me? What boundary have I been postponing? What truth have I been softening? What expectation have I been carrying silently? What role am I still performing that is diminishing of who I am? And once you understand that, the goal changes. The goal is not to become a woman who never feels resentment. The goal is to become a woman who listens earlier, a woman who notices the first tightening, the first inner no, the first moment her body starts saying, this is too much, even while her mouth is still saying, it's fine. That is the work. Becoming honest sooner, that is a very different standard. So I want to offer you something simple. I want you to think of one area of your life where resentment keeps showing up. Maybe it is in your relationship, maybe with your children, maybe with work or with family, maybe even with yourself. And once you find that area, I want you to ask yourself these questions. Number one, what am I repeatedly doing that I no longer want to keep doing? The second question is, what truth have I been postponing? And the next question is, what will need to change for resentment to become less necessary? And let me give you one more question. If I keep living this exact dynamic for the next 3 years, who will this resentment turn me into? This last question matters because resentment shapes you. It can turn a warm woman cold, a soft woman guarded, a loving woman distant. So if you do not want resentment to shape your identity, then you have to respond to it while it is still a signal. Not after it has become your personality in that part of your life. You may want to journal on these questions. You may want to sit quietly with one of them. And if you have to pick one to sit quietly, I will suggest the last one. Let me repeat it to you. If I keep living this exact dynamic for the next 3 years, who will this resentment turn me into? Resentment is not the enemy, but also is not meant to lead your life. It is a messenger. And like many messengers, it gets louder when it is ignored. So if resentment has been building in you, I do not want your response to be shame. I want your response to be honesty. Where have you been leaving yourself out? Where have you been saying yes without consent from your own body? Where have you been performing strength while quietly becoming emotionally tired? Where have you been giving in ways that are no longer fulfilling you? When resentment exists, it often means this. You have been loving, serving, helping, holding, and caring, but not always from a place that includes you. And this is when the work that needs to be done starts by telling the truth to yourself, to listen to your needs, to stop calling self-abandonment love, to stop calling silence maturity when it is really fear, to stop waiting for resentment to do the speaking for you. It may begin as pain, but it becomes wisdom when you let it lead you back to the truth. And that is the invitation. Stop calling it love when the cost is your own emotional depletion. If this episode spoke to something real in you, don't just nod at it and move on. Take one honest moment today and ask yourself, where have I been leaving myself out? And if you know this pattern is deeper than one difficult week, if overgiving, emotional exhaustion, and quiet resentment have become too familiar, take the burnout assessment in the show notes. It will help you see more clearly what is really draining you and where you need to come back to yourself. And if this episode brought someone to mind, a woman you love, a friend, a sister, a colleague, someone who has been carrying too much in silence, share this episode with her. Sometimes one honest conversation can open a door that has been closed for a long time. I will see you next week.